Please stand for today's scripture readings. Our first reading today is from Luke chapter 6, verses 46 through 49. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? I will show you what he is like who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. He is like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but it could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my word and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. And then let's turn to John 14, 1 through 7. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know that way? And Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. This is the word.
Okay, is it working? Okay, I am not somebody who can just stand here, so we'll try this out, but it feels real weird. Couple disclaimers real quick. I don't have the gift of teaching. I am not Dan. But hopefully, and I'm just praying that God is going to be able to use me to speak to you. But that is not my gifting. And I will tell you, I almost tried to force it. I really wanted to read the book of Philemon, because it is one chapter in one book. And sometimes, like, Dan has these readings that go on forever, and I wanted to be like, Dan, guess what? When I preached, I had an entire chapter and an entire book read, mic drop. But that was it. But it didn't work. It was not where God was leading me, but I thought that that would have been really funny. So, not Dan. Second disclaimer, I spend my time talking to teens. You can put me in front of hundreds of teens, which I have done, and I'm not nervous that they are my people. I feel at home. I am really nervous right now. There's a fraction of you compared to people I have spoken to before. And so, but I'm nervous. When I get nervous, I talk fast. I am my father's daughter. I can ramble and go on rabbit trails. And so, just continuing to hope and pray that God can keep my focus, and whatever happens, you're going to get something from it at least. And the last thing that I just really want to say, it's on my heart. If any of you are at all like me, comparison is an issue that I wrestle with and have to battle all of the time. I'm going to be sharing elements of my story with you and my testimony, and I know when I hear other people, sometimes I have to battle the thoughts of, man, why has God not done this in my life, or why does my story look like this, or had this, or all of the types of things. And I just want to, that is a straight up lie from the enemy. You have your relationship with Christ and your journey, and it is not better and it is not worse than mine. So if even for a moment today you're like, dang, why did God do that for you and not me? You're like, oh, dang, she's real messed up. Just in the name of Christ, be gone, Satan, with those thoughts. So, I want you to think for a moment, I'm guessing you all have them, about a scar that you might have on your body. So I have, maybe you can't see it, there's a mark right here. The scar was gotten when I quickly reached into the oven, grabbed something, pulled it out, didn't pay attention, and ended up getting marked right there. And at first, man, it hurt. It bubbled up. It was super noticeable. I had to be careful what I wore for a couple of days, and it itched. And then in time, it healed. And now I still have the scar. It is still there, but it doesn't hurt. I am remembered of it when I see it. But it's very different. And then there are times maybe where certain things will remind me of it differently if I bump of an elsewhere. But for the most part, it's just really different. It's healed. And we talk actually at Treehouse a lot with teens of if we have extra time, it's like, hey, what's a scar story you got? Because kids love to try to outdo their own scar stories. But what's so cool in that is, just the healing that happens and the things that change. So what I'm going to be doing today is inviting you in to places within my heart. And if you were to walk into my heart home, because I'm going to be talking a lot about houses, but into my heart home, you would notice that my heart has several different markings that are very noticeable, that have been healed and that don't define me, but that are certainly a part of who I am and who I have become. It's also just evidence of some of the really cool things that God has done and the power of healing that can happen. And so I'm going to share some of those things with you. Some of the stuff is really hard. I'm going to touch on some things really briefly. And if you've got questions of hey, can you expand into this or whatnot, please afterwards talk with me. I'm happy to share more. So I'm going to start at the beginning of the story, but before I do, I'm going to take a moment to, about 4 years ago, I was living at the time at my dad's house. If you don't know I think you all know who my dad is. My dad is Jim, who plays the piano, and Linda is my stepmom. But I was living in their home, and I was doing that because I was in the middle of healing from a divorce. So I had been living there for a couple of years, and was trying to kind of sort out and pray about what was next. And I felt genuinely from God that I was to buy a house. Okay, buy a house, it's me. It is just me, I don't need a whole house. But it was very clear I needed to buy a house, and that it was super clear to me that my house was to be a house of healing. Okay, what does that mean? I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but my house was to be a house of healing. And it was super clear to me that there were gonna be other people that were gonna be staying with me in that house. And I'm gonna tear up talking about some of this. And that he even guided where I was supposed to live, a part of St. Paul where not everybody looked like me, because it was clear as I was journaling that there were going to be several different people living in my house, and many were not going to look like me. And I was to live in this space where when we walked down the street, there would be people who looked like me and anyone who was living in my home. And all of this just was so very clear to me. And so ended up 3.5 years ago buying a home on the east side of St. Paul, which, let me tell you, many, many years ago, if you ever would have told me that was where I was going to land for any period of time, I would have said absolutely not. God just continues to have a sense of humor. I will tell you, from the beginning to where my life is now, there's almost nothing from my childhood that I would have been this was my dream in my life. Nothing is how I had dreamed of my life. So maybe some of you can relate. Backing way up, I was born into a Christian home, and I know the Bible talks about laying down, teaching up a child, raising them for the way that they should go. My parents were wonderful. They were awesome. But I was very much the oldest child. So what I mean by that is I was a rule follower. And I was very bossy and in charge. And how I was interpreting a lot of the messages that I was receiving was very much these are the rules that I need to follow. These are the things that I need to do. And if I do all of those things, God will bless me, God will honor me, and life will be okay. Very much rules. And I was really good at following the rules and people pleasing. And it served me well overall for many, many years. I had good friends. I got along with my family. I enjoyed things went well. And then at 19, because the reality is the storms come, right? So my house at this moment is built, if you will, on rules and laws. 19, massive storm comes, and shows how little foundation I had in that house. My mom very suddenly passed away. I mean, she was quite literally making the bed when it happened. And that at first, like the very beginning, and if anyone has ever been I'm sure at some point you've all been in a crisis, when everything gets kind of like knocked down, the house is down, you're standing in the rubble, and for at least at first, it was like, okay, I survived, my brother survived, my dad, like we survived, we're here, okay, and you start to be able to figure that out, and then all of a sudden it hits you of like what really happened. It makes me think a little bit of I was in a car accident almost 10 years ago that was really, really bad. I was the only one who walked away from the accident. There was airlift, ambulance. A woman had fallen asleep at the wheel, we found out later. There's huge things involved, but when it happened, I remember I got hit and got flung across the freeway in my car, and I remember sitting for a minute, my whole body's shaking, but thinking, okay, I survived. Okay, I got it. And at that point, I was able to get up and I was able to help the woman who was in a car. Fire had been started, was trying to do that. I was talking to people and paramedics and police and doing all of the things. And it wasn't until I got home where it just flooded over me what had happened, how hard that was, how scary it was. For the next couple of days, I just shook because of the adrenaline. I was nervous to get back in a car. But so I say that. I've never had my house destroyed ever, but it felt like a very similar feeling to then for a while, it was like, okay. But about 6 months after my mom died, I kind of hit a wall. There was nothing particular about that time frame. But I think I was hit a wall where all of a sudden, I had never really been a super angry person. I mean, I had my angry moments. I was a teen. All teens, I feel like, have some forms of angry moments. But it bubbled inside of me this super intense anger. And this anger that was so big, and it started to kind of come out in different ways. So I was super angry at God. I was angry. It's I followed the rules. I did the things right. This is what I was supposed to do, and yet you still took my mom. I don't get it. This doesn't make any sense. So I was angry, really angry at God. I dealt with some real intense anger towards my mom. Why did you leave me? Why did you leave? And the rational part of the brain could tell me, she didn't do, something she chose this. But it didn't matter. I was still really angry. And then, quite honestly, I was really angry at my dad. I was angry because at the time I was hurt and angry, and a lot of that anger, the easiest person to take it out on was him. So there was all of this anger. And so in trying to do all of this anger, I hit this wall of you know what? If I were with my teens right now, I would probably throw up my middle fingers. I won't right now, but it's just to simply prove the point of, I was like, F you, God. I'm so angry. I followed the rules. I did this stuff. I'm done following the rules because clearly that doesn't work. And so took off into another direction and decided and said I was going to follow my heart, I was going to follow my passions, and I was going to feel good. Because sometimes following the rules doesn't feel good. So I started, made some other friends, followed, got super attached to a guy, that became my whole entire world, started drinking a little bit heavier, and then started just pursuing, I was wanting to be a teacher, that's all I'd wanted to do, pursuing that. So when I say that, I struggled, I know lots of people have different stories. It wasn't, on the outside, everything still looked real put together, but inside, I was just, there was that anger and that hatred bubbling. But I got through. I was with people all the time. I figured out a way to survive. And then graduated college and started, within 2 weeks of graduating college, I got a teaching job. Ended up teaching second grade. Awesome. This is what my dream was. This is what I had been wanting to do since I was 3 years old. So I get this teaching job, and I start doing it, and I loved teaching. I absolutely loved it. Oh, sorry, I should stop moving. Okay. And loved this teaching job, and but started to realize, okay, I have this teaching job, I'm doing what I want to do. This is it? I am tired, I'm exhausted, I feel like I don't get to see my friends, and slowly what started bubbling up was just that agony of being alone and the hurt and the pain, and it bubbled and it bubbled and it bubbled until one night I had decided that I just didn't want to be here anymore. I think the pain of facing, having lost my mom and so many other hurts, I was like, I'm just done. It's too much. I'm done. And I had a plan of how I was going to take my life that night. I had gotten a dog that fall. Loved dogs, still love animals. But I had gotten a dog, and I'm sitting there getting ready to take my life, and all of a sudden this thought comes over me on who's going to take care of Murphy, which was my dog. That wholeheartedly is what stopped it. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out, I didn't think through who was going to take care of the dog. I got to figure that out before I leave. So it was enough to stop that night. And then the next day to be in a headspace of like, oh my gosh, wow, okay, that almost happened. And that was the first time, like, I need help. I need to figure something out. Like, this isn't how I want to live. I need help. And so I ended up, that started a kind of a new journey of like, okay, how can I, that's again, I'd built up this what I had thought was this house of finding the passions and doing this, and it was just washed away again. And so now trying to merge. So I went to see a counselor. I ended up on meds. I started really taking time to start building an actual, not just like I'm doing the things to check off the list of what you're supposed to do to follow Jesus. I started to do some other things and have an interest in spending time with him more, and and trying to start putting together like, well, maybe it's their laws and passions, and okay, so, and then I was able to stop, and when things are destroyed, before you rebuild the house, Tom would know this more than me. I know really nothing about building a house, but you can, like, if something's, what you can sit and think, what, is there anything here that's usable? Is there anything that you can use from the rubble? And I think looking back, I mean, that first time, like, there's elements of, like, when I had gotten this destroyed, my passion, like, God did put passions in me. He did put things in me that was good, and that's okay to pursue what God is calling me to. And then, like, looking back of, like, there is an element of law and rules and order that God has for protecting me and for loving me. And how can, like, some of those start to come together? So it's starting to do that a little bit, very, very slowly. And then in that time, still with the same guy, had been for a very long time, we got married, and after we were married, while on our honeymoon, actually, there was a ton of red flags. I'm not going into element, that relationship in itself would be a 3-hour talk, but there had been lots of red flags for years, but we got married, and actually while on my honeymoon, I found out that just 3 weeks earlier, like, he'd been having an affair, and that's how my marriage started. And by no means was it. So then the first year of our marriage, my anger was back again. So anything that I had felt like I had worked on of, like, God, I was trying to follow you and do this and follow those rules and back and following my passions and ending up here, and yet, all of those things, and I was angry at him, and I was trying to navigate, like, I didn't know how to have a fair fight because I could win every single fight. I was very difficult to live with because when things were not going my way, I had the card of, like, well, you were cheating. And so I did. I won every time, but that didn't go well. I do not recommend. But got to a spot of, like, where I started to heal a little bit more and feel better, but he kind of started shutting down. Right before our 3rd anniversary, I found out that there was unfaithfulness again. And I left the house in the middle of the night and actually ended up at my dad's house at like 2 in the morning. And my plan at that moment had been, I'm getting divorced, I'm done, like, I can't do this anymore. This has been 3 years of trying to battle this, and through a series of events, I really felt like I wasn't supposed to yet, which was very confusing to me, but that I was to fight for my marriage. And I remember sitting in a counselor's office that my sister had actually scheduled for me, and I'm there thinking, I've tried counseling, I've done all these different things, but she looked at me and she goes, Heidi, I'm asking you to give me 26 months. I was like, you want what? At the time I was 30. I was like, 26 months? At that point, I'm going to be over 32. I need to get divorced. I still want kids. All of these different things. Like, I need to, like, start this process now. But she's like, I need you to give me 26 months of work, and she was a Christian counselor, and so work and pursuing Jesus, and we're going to do some things. And at the end of that, it was such a weird number too, 26 months. But at the end of that, I can't promise what will happen to your marriage. I have no idea, but I can promise that you're going to be different. And I walked out. I told her I'd give her 3. 3 months. But 3 months did turn into over 2 years. And I don't know how to describe the transformation that happened in my life then. And so actually during my separation, I had left teaching, I had been at Treehouse about 6-8 months before I separated. So here I was like sitting with teens trying to mentor while going through this divorce. But the transformation that happened, it was almost so sudden. Like I have most of the things in my life have been very slow go and change, and I know God can do sudden changes, but this was all of the sudden, I had this ability I remember sitting with my ex-husband when we separated of like, okay, I'm not gonna get divorced, we're gonna separate, but doing so, it was this out-of-body experience where it was like I was up here looking at myself, and I had to look at him as like, okay, this isn't my husband. I mean, he is, but like if I think of it that way, the blood boils. But instead, I was able to sit like, this is just a really broken man of God, someone who God like fearfully and wonderfully made and just dearly loves. And somehow, like I said, it has to be God. I was able to take that shift and to see that. And an element of the things that I started to learn as I look back was working with teenagers who the rest of the world looks at often, not the rest, many people in the world look at as, you don't stand much of a chance, like what are you going, look at all the odds stacked against you, look at the choices that you're making. And getting to know them and getting to know their families over the years helped teach me of like, wow, there's so much more that you're not seeing, and they had taught me to look and have a different perspective. And so then here I was with this man I was married to. And so for the next 2 years, God did insane things to my heart. Like forgiveness. First off, I think when you have a foundation, and this is a stretch, but like I'm sure when you're digging into the ground, there's rocks. It's not like just some smooth sailing digging. And I think that as you're trying to like form a foundation, there's stuff that's like just maybe making it difficult or cutting off that flow or the ability to grow. And it was almost like being able to just fully forgive my ex-husband, and the way that from there some of that forgiveness flowed towards like realizing that forgiveness that I needed with my family and with just other different people. And man, taking that like rock of unforgiveness out, it was like suddenly building that foundation. It grew so fast and so deep that it was like realizing how much that had held me back. And really just, I mean, I got into, with that, I was so excited. I got up, and I honestly, it's not where I'm at in this moment, but during that season, it was, when I get up, I couldn't wait to journal. I couldn't wait to pray. I couldn't wait to spend time with the Lord. There was just so many cool things that he was doing. I got invited into this, like, I got asked to actually become the area director of my Treehouse location during this time, and I remember thinking, I can't, like, I have too many other things going on in life, and I had this, like, one of the first pictures I've ever gotten. Sometimes God speaks to me in pictures. But I was sitting, and all of a sudden I had this picture of me being in the boat, like, and God being like, Jesus being like, Heidi, come out of the boat. And I'm like, yes, okay, and this is that. But all of a sudden, I had this, I mean, it's such a clear picture, still, like the most vivid picture in my head, like 8 years later. He is like, yes, Heidi, he takes my hand, and he goes, I want you out of the boat. I don't want you to just walk with me. Like, we're going to dance together. And it was this beautiful dancing on the water with Jesus, and I love to dance. I'm horrible at it, but I love it so much. And it is still throughout like so many different moments over the last several years. There's just different things that come where I'm just reminded, like, oh man, Jesus wants to dance with you. I was feeling down in August. I've just been really struggling, and I was at someone, and a gentleman had approached me. And he just said, it might sound crazy, but I just feel like God's saying to remind you that he just wants to dance with you. And this gentleman had no idea how much that visual has just really played this huge part in my life. So all of these things happening. Now, I had believed during this time, like wholeheartedly with everything, believed God was going to heal my marriage. I was certain of it. I didn't have doubts. Like, I probably had moments of doubts, but I was like, God's going to heal my marriage. And at the time of almost 2 years, not quite, series of events happened that are, at this point, I mean, it doesn't matter, but it was time to walk away. My marriage wasn't going to be healed. God released me. And at that moment, that I was released. It was a feeling of, this is awful and not what I wanted and not what I dreamed, and huge grief. And I was okay. Here for the first time, I'd had this massive storm coming at me, and I was withstanding it. It hurt. There were things falling. I was a bit of a mess, but I was still standing. And that was one of those moments that in the midst of that grief and that heartache and that pain, just being able to praise God, of being able to genuinely see the work of when other storms have come, I had fallen, it had destroyed me, and this one didn't. And then got moved into my dad's house. Lots of just healing there. In that time, actually, I started to come here. Had a lot of hurt within the church. My ex-husband works for a church. There have been all kinds of things where I feel like people had, just a lot of church hurt. And so coming here and the healing and whatnot that has happened here. During that shift too, soon after, my treehouse started to shift. And so soon, all of a sudden, the teens that are coming were living in poverty, and there were so many other things that started to happen and to change and to shift, and my mind was shifting and seeing things differently. And then it was right around when all that's going that we come back to where we had started, of God telling me, you need to buy a house, this house of healing. Now, when you go to buy a house, again, I feel so funny talking about building a house in any capacity with Tom here, who really does build houses. But I know they have you walk around to look at that foundation. And when you think about the foundation, it's it's the load-bearing portion of the structure. So obviously when you have, so I remember looking at the house, all the different houses, and I brought my dad along to a lot of them, looking around okay, everything can seem like it's okay, but we got to make sure that the load-bearing portion's there, otherwise it gets destroyed. And the reality is the foundation is what is gonna last. So you don't want to have cracks in it. Just I think that picture of, as I'm walking into this house that I bought, of the idea of okay, God telling me that I'm being healed, I'm continuing to grow and work on your foundation, and that there is ahead of you more things than you can possibly ask, imagine, or dream. I've just got such good things for you, my daughter. I love you, you're beloved, you're all of, just continuing to speak that into it. So then, I end up in that house, and through that series of events, for those of you who are around, Timothy and Love ended up in my home. That whole story is so God. I was trying to follow what he was asking me to do, but I wasn't going to take in full-time care, because Lord knows, as a single woman in ministry, I did not have the capacity to raise kids full-time on my own. And again, God showed up and provided and did all kinds of really cool things in that way. And now recently, actually, this week, so actually yesterday was Timothy and Love's birthday. They had the same birthday, so that's just a very cool side note. But this past week, I finally felt ready to change their room. I'm not ready to take in other kids yet, and I don't know what God is going to do and to bring, but it was time to prepare a place. And it's okay, and I have learned that when God tells you to do something, you do it, even if it just doesn't really make sense, because he'll figure the rest out for me. So I did. A friend came in, and she redesigned the whole bedroom so that there's elements of it that are some things that were with Timothy and Love's room, but knowing that there's going to be some other kids in there, and trying to design it in a way that it could be for a boy or for a girl or for different ages, which was just because I don't know, but I'm just working to prepare that room. And then in that, this past week, then, as I've been doing that and really praying and processing, I've just been thinking about that reminder of that invitation at God, first off, God saying to trust me that my Father is preparing a place for you. And gal, I sure hope, when they're preparing a room, when we get to heaven, we're all living together. It's not just these separate things. It's together, and this invitation in. And so then I just started to have that picture of what a cool, thinking of that preparing that room, when it's if his kingdom really is here on earth, part of our job to prepare rooms for people here, to bring them in, to love on, to care for, and to show them the love of Christ, so that they can join us in the rooms that are being prepared for them in heaven. And so continuing to like, what does even that look like? What does that mean for me? And this, it's okay. I mean, actually getting to use my home in ways. I do not have the gift of hospitality either, but God has provided in so many different ways. But so yeah, to bring kids in a couple of weeks, one of my teens is pregnant and her family had no place to host the baby shower. And so we've been in conversation of like, you are more than welcome to come and host it here. And what's so cool is that my house isn't big, but it's near a bus line. And in this particular situation, most of the family members don't have access to vehicles. So what they needed was a place that was near a bus line. And so talking to the aunt yesterday of like how wonderful that is, and so like they're so gracious and so thankful. There's been opportunities to get to know different like families within the teens that I get to work with, getting to, just really do life with people. And preparing that space. Now, for you, that might not be what that is, but the idea of preparing your heart, just really preparing your heart for what God has to offer, because whatever he has you doing, it will in some way impact people, because we are here for people. We are here to point people to Jesus. And a lot of my style, I tell people about Jesus all of the time, but always it is my prayer that if I don't say a single word, like if I don't say Jesus' name out loud, that I will still ooze him everywhere I go so that I don't have to say anything. It is the biggest compliment, which I get occasionally of like, what's up with you, Heidi? You're different. It has been like, that's what a gift of like, and then getting to that, it opens up the door of like, wow, it's not me. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Let me tell you all the, which is the coolest thing to be able to get to share and to do. And then the ways that he has worked and woven of when I gave up control, when I've let go of like, this is the life I wanted, because I did. All I wanted, y'all, was I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be married, I wanted to be a wife, and I wanted to have kids. And here I stand before you. Genuinely, most days I really do. I'm so grateful for my life. But I am not a teacher in the same capacity. I don't teach in a classroom, but I love my job. I am not a wife, and I don't have biological kids. And yet I get to stand here and be like, God is so good. And he has so much for me, and he has so much for you, and that mistakes that you've made or things that have happened, like he can use that. He's used my entire experience to now, and he's going to put you in places that don't make sense. Excuse me. I spend more time with people that don't look like me, that grew up very socioeconomically different than me. And it continues to not make sense. But in that, God shows up time and time and time and time again. And wow, I think there's an element of him getting glory and honor that is more powerful than had it been. So I'm going to try to wrap up here because there's a whole lot. As I said, I'm kind of all over the place, so thank you for your patience. But for you just to kind of wrap up on is to really take a moment, what is your foundation in? What are the things of that are yep, you should keep and change or keep and that are good, but what are the things that God is calling to you to that maybe is that's more? What are the ways that, do you have something like unforgiveness or the things that are just holding you back from elements of things that God has for you? And sometimes there's elements of that foundation that needs to break. There are times when something didn't set right. It got poured, but it dried before it was ready. You might need to break some of that stuff apart, and because again, God can do so much more. So what is your foundation in? What is God asking you to prepare for? He talks about us being prepared. For everybody, it's different. It might not be preparing an actual bedroom in your home for kids to live with you, but there are things, I'm certain of it, that he has put on your heart that he is going to be doing. And those him asking you to do it might right now make no sense. I mean, when he asked Noah to build an ark, wait, what? It's never rained. What does that mean? So all of that just to really listen of what to be prepared for and the ways that God can use you. And then who is God calling you to invite into those rooms, into those spaces, into your heart. Sometimes have to be a little room. But who is God calling to have you invite in? Because, he just wants to do, again, more than you can possibly ask or imagine. I'm going to read to you real quick to finish what's on the front of my cover. And so it's something that I don't know, I just love what it says here on where I've just been kind of writing notes in. But it says, I am that warrior woman who gets up despite the enemy trying to destroy me. A woman who declares victory before seeing it. A woman who believes I will receive my miracle because I know the Lord I serve is alive by my side every day. And I just pray that for you as well.